Hey, Bradley, I bought an expired domain and I've noticed the trust flow on the www version has all the metrics, but without www it's 0. How do I use that to pass the most trust flow to my links? Thank you. Well, it depends on how you're doing it. If you're going to build the site out instead of just doing a redirect, then you want to build the site out on and make the www version of that site the primary URL. So you want to set a canonical in the HTML header, right? That sets the canonical to the www version of the URL. And then also you can add an htaccess file, depending on where you're hosting it. You can add an htaccess file, which has a redirect to the www version, the non-www version of the domain to the www version of it, right? So that's an htaccess directive that you can add depending on what kind of host. Some of the cloud hosts won't allow that. Also, if you want, you could use, if it's HTTPS, right? So if it requires SSL, then you could use Cloudflare and then use flexible SSL and then set up a page rule to always redirect to the www version of the URL as well. Does that make sense? So there's a number of ways that you can do it. It just depends on how are you hosting the site. Does it require SSL? If it does, then use flexible SSL with a Cloudflare. If you're hosting on Amazon S3, you can't do that with Rackspace. Depends on where you're hosting it. So it's going to vary depending on which kind of cloud host you're using. Also, like I said, depends on if you're building it out or if you're just doing a redirect. If you're going to do a redirect, I talked about this in the mastermind. I prefer to use what's called a meta refresh. And then you can install an HTML, just a very simple HTML file in the cloud storage slot, whether it's a S3 bucket or Google Cloud Storage or whatever. You can upload an HTML file that is essentially nothing other than an HTML header with what's called a meta refresh in the HTML header. And you can force, you'd still put a canonical in there to the www version of it, but then you would set the meta refresh to redirect to whatever your target is. And I don't recommend doing that for money site links, only to buffers if you're going to do redirects. And again, using the meta refresh method. And again, I teach all of this stuff in the mastermind, guys. I can't get into that here. This is a free forum. I'm not going to get into that here, but if you want to learn like exactly what I do in my link building business, I mean, 100%, I teach everything that I do in my link building business in the mastermind. And what's funny is about 60% of my link building clients are mastermind members. It's funny. I teach them exactly what to do. And then people say, well, that's awesome. It's too much work. Will you do it for me? Yes, I can do that for you. So, but here's how you can do it. You know what I mean? So and a lot of our mastermind members are doing it, which is great. That's why I teach it. So you guys can do it in-house, do it yourself. So if you want to learn how to do that, come join the mastermind. But as I just mentioned, it depends on what, how you're hosting it. What are you going to do with that link? I prefer to build the sites out over redirects. And so most of the time I'm building the sites out. Like I said, we set a canonical and HTML header. We'll add an htaccess file for those that will allow us to do it. And then in some cases we will use page rules but you have to have the Cloudflare icon turned on. So the reverse proxy turned on in Cloudflare in order to use page rules. And you can do that, by the way. You can do that with Amazon S3 without using SSL. So that's, you just turn, in Cloudflare, you would turn the SSL to off, right? I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but if the site requires HTTPS, if the most powerful version of the URL has HTTPS, then you can use Amazon S3 with Cloudflare as your DNS provider, and then set flexible SSL turned on with the Cloudflare icons turned on, and then you set flexible SSL on in Cloudflare, right? And then that works beautifully. If it doesn't have SSL, you can, as long as you're still hosting on S3, it won't work with Rackspace and some of the other ones as well, but you can still host on Amazon S3 and still use Cloudflare as your DNS. You just turn flexible the SSL settings to off. But you would have to still have the Cloudflare icon turned on, which changes the IP of the site, which is okay because one of the reasons why I love using Cloudflare is because there are millions of sites on the Cloudflare IP blocks or ranges. So you're like hiding in the middle of a big freaking crowd. And that's a good thing, right? It's better than having like unique IP. So I mean, it's a good thing. Like I like using Cloudflare for hiding footprints. So whenever you turn the reverse proxy on, so the cloud icon turned on, you change the IP address from what the IP address was of the bucket that you were hosting on originally to one of the blocks, the IP ranges that are in Cloudflare, which will vary depending on which Cloudflare account you're using. So anyway, to get full details on how to do all that, come join the mastermind.